do you want senior debt? Why is the last one on the list? Why do you strive to get there? All the bank asks for in return for giving you money is 4.5% interest, or 6% interest, or 8% interest, whatever the rate environment is at the time. Someone gives you venture capital equity and they're asking for 30%, 50%, 80% ownership in your company. And if you have this awesome idea that you want to retain control of, that you don't want anyone to redirect you somewhere else, you don't want to have to answer to anyone else, I mean, the bank debt somewhat provides you with that. But again, there's a lot you have to do before you can really get there. Shoot, I don't know, I'm not going to get into details on, well, you have to take into account 101 and 102, so you know there's current liabilities and long-term liabilities. What do you use bank debt for? If you're like a service company, you might go to Union Bank and you say, I need a line of credit just to pay my employees to go out and provide this service, because I have to pay my employees for, every 2 weeks. But then they send a bill to their customer and they don't get that bill back for 30 days. Well, if I don't get paid for that service for 30 days, but I need to pay that employee now, then I have a funding gap. So I get a line of credit. In personal finance, just think of like basically a credit card. It operates in the same way. I'm going to get a line of credit from the bank so I can pay my employees and they can perform their service. Or another good example is a car dealership. Chances are that owner of the car dealer didn't have enough money to purchase 400 cars to put on their lot. That's an incredible amount of money. So you get a line of credit from a bank so that you can buy those cars, and then when you sell the car and you get paid for it, you pay off the note from the bank, and then you keep the profit for yourself to pay your employees and your advertising costs and your administrative expenses and whatnot. So that's one option, is a line of credit, and that's going to be a current liability that funds current assets. The other option is like, I'm buying a new building, we're relocating, or I'm buying a new building to add an additional restaurant location. I'm going to purchase a competitor. I'm going to get into a new line of business and I want to expand, and I don't have enough cash to do that myself, so I'm going to need a 5-year loan that I pay off in small chunks each month for that. So that's what Mandy's kind of trying to say with this slide. It's going to show up on current and long-term portions, and those lines of credit, you pay them off hopefully you pay them off every 30 days, or pay them down every 30 days, I should say. Whereas, your long-term debt up to 25 years, depending on what you're financing. So, the 5 C's of credit. Who's familiar with that, or has at least heard of that term? A few. It's huge in underwriting, so it's huge in what I do. And it's character, capacity, collateral, capital, and conditions. And that's what these next slides are going to be about. Character, how the business and principles of the business view and have performed on previous debt obligations. So it's really, if this person can afford to pay me back on my loan, are they going to do it? Do I trust that they have the character to fulfill their obligations? Or if they can't pay it back, how are they going to make it right? Are they going to seek other sources of cash to be able to pay me back to make it right, or are they just going to walk away? So credit report helps to an extent with that, and this is something I want to make sure that you guys take home. Maybe this is one of the things that you learned for the day, is that the decisions that you make right now are going to affect your future as a business owner. Or even if you don't get into owning your own business, if you are wanting to become a leader in an organization, the decisions that you make now actually do have consequences for later on. I think a lot of people have this idea that, when we're in undergrad, we can kind of, have fun for 4 years and it doesn't make a whole lot of difference, but the decisions that you make, the fact that they can show up on your credit report, that's kind of what I was getting at, and that kind of shows, like, does this person have a good history of paying back their obligations? You know, business plan, and I don't know, it does show someone's ability to think about all the possibilities. It shows if someone has taken an entrepreneurship class. I mean, a cruddy business plan versus a well thought out and well written plan does say something about the person's intelligence and how serious they are about the business. Their character, I don't know if it tells as much about that, but the resume kind of does. And on a resume, like if they're involved in the community, if they, and by that I mean, you know, are they volunteering for a nonprofit? Are they giving back to the community? That shows some character in my opinion. Current standing on monies, that's kind of part of your credit report. Or already borrowed with the lender. I mean, we can look back on our own personal records and see, hey, they got a car loan from Union Bank 5 years ago. Did they have a late payment on that? And then finally, the personal financial statement. This kind of shows is if this person has like an extravagant lifestyle, I call it. A lot of times you might have a business that has a fairly healthy a fairly healthy balance sheet, and they show that they can make money on their income statement. But that owner is just like bleeding the company of money. In other words, they're paying themselves huge salaries, they're paying themselves huge dividends. They don't really care about the future of that company. So with their personal financial statement, you can kind of say, well, are they keeping that money? What are they doing with it? Maybe they're putting it in a trust. Maybe they're really not living an extravagant lifestyle. But if they're taking $500,000 every year out of the company and they have nothing to show for it, they're probably blowing that money on extravagant things that don't last very long. So we care about that because it shows a little bit of their character, and it shows if worse comes to worse and we have to go after the individual for the money, do they actually have anything to pay us back? But lastly, and if I had written this PowerPoint, I'd probably put this first. The question I ask myself about character is this person a sleazeball? And I'll give you an example for that. Well, I'll give you two examples. One, you know, car dealers kind of get a bad rap. They have kind of bad reputations a lot of times. Not all of them are like that, but that reputation or that stereotype was sort of born out of some sort of realities. And we had a customer at Union Bank who had a huge, like $8 million line of credit with us for purchasing vehicle inventory for their dealership. And they weren't that great of a company. I mean, they weren't terrible, but we renew those lines of credit that I told you about. We renew those each year, so we take another look and see if they still are doing all right. So their line of credit came up for renewal, and we need to decide, do we want to continue this relationship? And by looking at the guy's financial statement and his tax return, I figured out that he was paying himself, like, not cash dividends out of the business, but he bought a yacht out of the business and then distributed it to himself to avoid a covenant that we had that said you can't distribute anything to yourself without Union Bank's approval. And the reason we had that, we don't have that on every loan, but the reason we had it is because we were concerned with the balance sheet eroding or the deterioration of the health of the company. So we had that covenant in there. Well, instead of paying himself a check, he just said, all right, well, I'll buy a yacht and then I'll distribute a yacht to myself and get around that. So I pointed that out in the analysis. And it probably wasn't, I don't know, maybe I pointed that out a little too harshly. Maybe I was too hard on the guy, but someone on committee just said, you know, the financials aren't terrible. I think that this business is probably going to be successful within the next year, but I'm not going to approve it just because I don't like the guy, because he's not honest with us. He tried to find a loophole to fund his extravagant lifestyle, and so he did it, and, you know, we said, no, we're not renewing your floor plan line of credit, and he had to go find another bank who would come in the next 30 days and give him $8 million. So that's the type of thing that I look at in character, is like, is this trying to find a loophole in a covenant that a bank gave you is kind of a sleazeball thing to do to me. Another one really quickly. We looked at financing one of the businesses down in the rail yard. Many of you have probably been there. Wasn't super strong. It was kind of risky, but the straw that broke the camel's back was that the guy had a couple of things on his background report when we did a criminal check on him, and it wasn't like vehicular manslaughter or a homicide or something, but it was enough to where people are like, yeah, I don't think that we're going to pursue this. So another thing about how character is actually important. I'm probably not going to get into details of this calculation. What this calculation means is DCR, if you can even see it, is a business spins off a certain amount of cash flow each year, and everybody wants a piece of it. The government wants a piece of it to pay your taxes. Investors want a piece of it in the form of dividends. Banks want a piece of it in the form of loan repayment. And I said investors want a piece of it in the form of dividends. Your business owners also want a piece of it. I mean, maybe they give themselves a bonus at the end, of the year, or dividend payments or whatever. So we have a calculation that we try to find how much of the excess cash flow is there. And at the bottom it says 1.22. We shoot for 1.2 minimum. But this is kind of to show when we book a loan at the bank, we have 3 sources of repayment, where we try to have 3 in every loan that we book. The first is going to be cash flow from operations, and that's capacity. How much cash flow are their operations actually generating? What do I mean by operational cash flow? It's just I'm going out and selling my product and getting money from my customers. That's kind of operational cash flow, as long as I do that at a profit. So we're trying to find out how much do they have, and that's our first source of repayment. Secondary source of repayment is collateral. And all too often, business owners, or even individuals when they're getting their own personal loans, think like, well, collateral is going to repay the loan. So if I'm wanting a $4,000 loan for a $6,000 car, obviously you should give me the loan, because if you have to repo my car, it's going to pay off the loan. Not true. Collateral is definitely the secondary source of repayment. If we repossess that car, we're probably not even going to get $4,000 for that $6,000 car. We're probably going to get $2,000, and then we'll have a loss. And so you always have to view it as your secondary source of repayment. If you take it from a business standpoint, if you're going out to, let's say you're leasing a building for your business, and 5 years, 10 years go by, and you think, I really want to buy this building that I'm leasing, so that when I'm 60 years old and I want to retire, I can sell my business, but I'll keep that building just for a source of income when I'm retired. So all too often business owners think, well, I need to buy it for $4 million, and so give me a loan for $3.9 million, and I'll put up $100,000 of my own money, and it should be a great deal, right? Because my collateral value is more than the loan value. Again, not true. We really want to look at the cash flow of that business. So that business that wants to pay $3.9 million for that $4 million building, if they're not making money, we're not going to do that. We're not a collateral-based lender. Going back, I think this is what Manny really wanted to highlight. When you are getting your business ready for bank financing, they're going to ask you for financial statements. And from an analyst, or myself, from my point of view, the better quality of statement you can afford to pay your accountant for, the better. I don't mean like pay him so he can cook the books and make you look a lot better. I mean, when you go to an accountant, they have multiple tiers, if you will, of how much work they do to find out if those numbers are accurate, I guess. And the more accurate, the more comfortable the bank's going to be with your financials. Audited are the best quality. If you're some mom and pop restaurant, you're not going to get an audited statement, and the bank's going to know that. But have an accountant prepare your financials if you're looking to get bank funding in the future. We do plenty of deals that don't have accountant prepared, but they're rather small. So if you can afford